Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Teams Day Online. This session is getting started with Microsoft Teams development with Azure Function, and my name is Fabian Williams. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft on the Microsoft Graph team focused on customer and partner experiences. On this screen, you'll see contact information for you to reach out to me. My email address, certainly connect with me on LinkedIn, and obviously you can send me tweets and direct messages on Twitter. We're living in a very interesting time right now in terms of just how conferences are. This session, for instance, is typically a 75-minute session chock full of demos, but being online and being virtual, this has some time constraints, and care had to be taken into ensuring that this could be done virtually and still have the same impact and in sufficient time. So what we have here today is an agenda that is going to cover a primer on Azure Functions, why you should build using Azure Functions, not just for Teams development, but in general, if you're building solutions for the cloud. Modalities for team development. So we're going to talk about just two different ways that you can go about developing for Teams. And I'm going to show you, one of the ways in real time, and another way I'm just going to give you a code walkthrough, and the information is going to be on GitHub. We're going to talk about environment setup for Teams development, because obviously if you're going to be doing this, you need to know, well, how do I start? Because right now we're just going to jump in and talk about it, and you're going to see a demo already done, but how do you sitting behind your computer, set up an environment for this? Then we're going to do a demo walkthrough of that setup, so you can actually see some of it to the extent that I can share, because obviously when you're doing stuff online, there's private keys, there's security keys and so on and so forth, of which I cannot share. So some of that would have to either be obscured, or it's going to be like when you're doing a cooking show where you have something where you set up the ingredients and then final product in the end. Then we're going to do a solution overview. Typically, this is where there's an interactive part of the session where there's a dialogue. So I may riff or monologue for a little bit there just to let you know what this is and not just pure demoware. And then we're actually going to go into a demo, showing one running, and then a call to action in the end. So the first thing that we need to understand, especially if this is brand spanking new to people, is what is Azure Functions, right? And in the top there, I'm not going to read the slide, certainly you can do that as I'm speaking, but the key takeaway here is event-based serverless compute. So really short sentence, but a lot to unpack from that. Event-based means that something needs to happen and then an action can be taken, all right? So that an event is being triggered. And trigger is a key term right there. And serverless compute. And serverless is something that gets, you ask 10 different people, you may get 11 different answers, right? So in this case, serverless compute means not the absence of servers per se, but the abstraction of servers. You're always going to need a server somewhere. It's just that you're not the one that having a piece of bare metal underneath your desk, that you're spinning up. This is something that's going to be inside the cloud, but it's also distributed in terms of you have a compute, which is your CPU. You have your I/O, which is your input/output for storage, and then you have memory as well. And these things are distributed, and you can pack them together to create a system as you would something bare metal underneath your desk, or it can be something where it's done on consumptive plans, or it's in a premium plan where you're either going to get something on demand, which which is typically more of the freemium side, and something always ready, always on that you can go to that is going to be very responsive. With that being said, that is basically some of the constraints that you're going to be working with in Azure Functions. But some key things are definitely an integrated programming model that uses triggers and bindings. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. The development experience is extremely rich, and you can bring at it any programming, well, I won't say any, you can bring a lot of programming languages, not just C#, to the table and build solutions, for the cloud on the Microsoft ecosystem, and certainly a lot of, hosting options based on what you want to do. Now, as I mentioned before, some of the concepts that are there are triggers and bindings. And I'm just going to pause there for a little bit on and unpack that a little bit. So triggers are basically, as you mentioned, it was event driven. So triggers is what triggers an event, to reuse the word again. And it could be something as simple as clicking a button on a window or on a phone or on going to a web link. And bindings are typically what you're writing to, which is optional in Azure Functions. So you can actually have an Azure function that just churns, gets a job done with no reasonable output, and you can have something that takes information from one point and then converts it into another and puts it somewhere else. So you're persisting data somewhere else. The rest are, that you get is all just a part of Azure in terms of, having proxies, having, continuous integration, continuous, deployment, CI/CD in terms of a rich DevOps model that comes with Azure that, allows you to build locally, push a button and publish, and continue to do that, in a cadence that will allow for, fresh and timely delivery. And of course, it comes with superior monitoring as a part of Microsoft Azure. And really key, you can debug locally. Something that if this was just a pure Azure function session, we'd definitely talk about that because that's really a cool feature. The fact that you can build for the cloud but debug locally, as a part of Azure Functions. So, if you're supposed to look at this high level, consider this little animation here where you have a trigger, something happening, goes into the functions environment. You have input binding working with it, so you're taking information from somewhere else, and boom, you have an optional output binding. So that's basically what you're seeing from this annotation, and this animated video right here. And basically this is the life cycle of Azure Functions. So 10,000 feet view, this is exactly what it is. So the next question is, why should you build using Azure Functions? And if notwithstanding this session and talking about Teams, you can see that how you can leverage Azure Function because it's an extremely scalable and extensible, environment. If you have web app backends, mobile backends, IoT backends, conversational bot processing, which is really cool, file processing, all of the things that you see here are examples of where Azure Functions can come in. And our two examples that we're going to do in our demo here today, consider it, how would I say? One of it is definitely going to be extending a SaaS application because Teams is software as a service and we're going to be extending it. And the other one, you can consider it a web app backend because you're going to be doing some processing. But most of it is definitely extending a SaaS application. I think, however, one of the best benefits, especially because of what Teams brings to the table, is having a conversational bot processing. So I want to call this out. We're not going to be doing this here specifically here, but this is the prime use case because of something that we're going to be doing in our demo. We're going to basically throw something in an environment, have an Azure function pick it up, which is going to be inside a queue, and then do some processing, and then send the response back to somebody else. I'm going to talk about it in another part of the demo, so I don't want to give too much away here, but this is an example of how you have a person doing something on one end, churning it, happening somewhere else, and output, visible output for somebody else. Another example, and this is again part of what we're going to be seeing here in the demo, is using a webhook. So webhooks, incoming webhooks, is something that is part of Microsoft Teams. And you can consider it as a URI endpoint that you can call from within your application and actually affect changes in time Teams. This, believe it or not, is probably one of the easiest way to work with Teams because using this model, you're working basically at a channel level, so it's very granular already. When, you can have a webhook for each particular channel inside a team. And you can have this communication there. So when you expose it, it only affects there. Or you can have Teams solution as such, where you're working within the team, tenant, or with the Microsoft tenant inside a team, inside a Teams team, inside channels, and then layer yourself down. We're going to talk about that as well. So that's a great segue into the modalities for team development. So the first thing that we should understand about Microsoft Teams is that Teams is basically a hub of where a lot of good workflows from Microsoft sits. All right. First of all, you have the ability to do IRC chat. So you're typing something in, a person responds back, and you can have that one-on-one dialogue or one-to-many dialogue or many-to-many dialogue over chat. You can certainly have video meetings as well. And again, extending the chat into just conversational, talking through your mouth, seeing somebody in a computer and responding, and that way, especially now in the era that we're living, where we're all virtual, working from home, homeschooling and such like that. You see the benefits from that. If you're in sports, certainly, the NBA games are being done through Microsoft Teams. Calls, picking up the phone. In fact, I don't even have a phone anymore. Basically, whenever I do meetings, I don't provide somebody a phone number. I say, hey, let me just send you a Teams invite, and then boom, it comes with a conference call, and you have video and so on and so forth. Files. So Teams, and this is one of the cool things because coming from my SharePoint days, the files in Teams are backed by SharePoint. So you have a site that's spun up using all of the benefits of SharePoint's Enterprise Content Management System, ECM system, that is being behind Teams, and of course you have apps and workflows as well. Now, that being said, some of the things that you can work within Teams is by creating tabs. So consider it like a UI canvas that you can create your app and throw it inside there. And again, Teams being the hub, you have people that are already inside the Teams environment doing all of the things that you saw on the previous screen. Now you can have your app in a tab that's running your application. Certainly, message actions, interpreting a chat is something that you can do as well. And that's part of what we're going to see in the demo. And of course, the rest is here for you as well. I won't go too much into that because obviously you can read it as we go along. But this is just some of the flexibility that the platform brings for you. Again, you can be building a solution for groups or building solution for individuals. And what we're going to see here today in one of the demo is where you can take one action and send it to many people. Again, I'm tempted to give away this because I'm going to talk about this inside the little risk section about the solution overview. But there's a lot of extensibility that you can get out of the box. Again, understanding the fact that the key thing is that you have many people using Teams, whether they're on their phones or whether they're on their laptops, and you can affect change immediately from anywhere because you're going to be either calling an API through the graph, or you can be responding to a webhook expose URI endpoint coming from Teams and have that immediate effect, which is the key thing, an immediate effect. So screenshot of the environment set up for Teams. This is the first one. And the first one here is showing you probably the simplest way to do it. So if you belong to a Teams environment, this is an example. If you look at the image on the left-hand side, you can, at the very bottom one, you can see me running through a demo test for what we're going to be doing here today. You can see the name is, Funct with Fab's Azure Functions hook, which is my webhook. And you can see this message inside here. You can see one a little bit more detailed here. And the example in this one is actually a business card that you take a photograph of, and that business card is sent to a Azure Blob storage, and then it's pushed into several different places. Information is extracted, context is created, and in this instance, a message is delivered to a Teams channel with some information as well. How that is set up, you can see that there's a Teams Accolade team. Here it is, the channel. And then you have an incoming webhook, and you basically can configure it. And one is configured right now. You can see it's the same name here, same name there. And we have that information persisted through a connector, right? So channel, connectors, and then one of the connectors is that incoming webhook. That's one way of how to do this. The second way of how to do this, and we're going to see this in a little bit later, this is all good, just leave behind stuff that you can reference, is through working as an app inside Microsoft Graph. So if one of the things I guess I should have started off with, but it's still not too late because we haven't really gone too far deep into it as yet, is that Microsoft Teams is basically a group inside inside Azure that has a moniker or a flag to set to make it a Microsoft Teams group. All right. So when you see here it says groups read write all, that's still basically getting you access to that team. And another place you can go is go to the Graph Explorer if you wanted to try that out to see it. Just go to groups and then you can actually see all of your Microsoft Teams there in addition to other groups as well. In this instance, however, you need to register an app inside your Azure AD. In case this one is called Office 365 Visitor Intake. And in the intake, we're working with calendars, we're working with the Microsoft Teams, and we're also reading user profile information. So these are all of the permissions that you have to provide in order to do that. This one is a little bit more robust, more expansive than the other one, which is just very, very tactical in terms of its approach. This one you can do quite a lot, as you can see, because it's a group, read, write, all. You can do anything inside it, whereas the other example is all about that channel that you're working with. So let's go ahead and take a look-see at that. I'm going to stop that right there. I'm going to bring this window. Is this the right one? Nope, it's this one. Bring this window down here. And we're going to come here. So as you can see here, we have a Teams accolade. And if I come here and go to connectors, you're going to basically see the same example that we saw before, and we can see there's tons of different connectors that you have inside here, quite a bit. But you can see some of them say add, some of them say configure. This one's already there. If I go to configured, I can configure it, but one's already configured, and it's this guy right here. If I click on manage, so this is now moving away from what we saw in the screenshot itself, you can see that you provide some information, which is providing a name for the webhook connection, which is what you saw there. You can upload a custom image. This is me at another conference in Ireland, I believe. And here is basically the webhook exposed endpoint that you will use to service what you want to send to this group. Notice you can use the word to your group. Now, so when you take this in our example is what we're going to be calling a little bit later on. All right. And here, which I'm going to show you this a little bit later on, I can use it aka.ms/o365-connectors is how to find out how I did all of this. All right, so that's one example of how to do that. And once you do that, then you can basically start to send a ton of information in. You can see a couple of them, here as well. Okay. The other example is here. All right. So what you do here, and we'll just dummy up one and talk a little bit about it. So let's say live Teams. You can create apps for your organization only, multi-tenant, and accounts in any organization, and also personal accounts as well. Typically, I do this because I'm building stuff for people to test, and I want to make sure that they can use it, using any account that they have, and using MSAL. And what MSAL provides you is the ability to not just use a work or school account, but you can also use your personal accounts as well. And almost everything I built today is built using MSAL. This one here, we'll just do. Actually, I don't have to put anything in there now, but I'll just do for now. And then we'll go ahead and register it. It's going to be a throwaway. This is the reason why I do it this way, because then you're going to see, you have your app ID, your tenant ID, and quite a few other stuff. But one of the things that you want to do down here, besides setting up authentication, which is how you do your client ID and client secret, all right, your ID tokens and so on and so forth, here's where you do your secret by setting up a new client secret. But one of the things I wanted to talk about before we go too far actually is if you wanted to try out the example, you could come here once you register your application and download one of these quick starts. And one of the examples you'll see later on is actually me extending a quick start in order to do it and make it work. But this is something where you actually, if you clicked on this, it'll already be pre-configured, pre-baked with all of the information. If you click F5, it'll actually work, and then you can just build from there. But what we want to do is go to API permissions. You'll see that there's only one right now. I can add a permission. I click on Microsoft Graph right here, and there's two type of permission models. If you want to interact with the user behind the app you're building, then you want to give it delegated permission where the person needs to consent for it, or you can give it an app permission where it's running almost like a daemon or a service, which is what we're doing for our examples because we're creating somewhat of a utility. So for me, I'm just going to do app permission for now, and I'm going to search for the word group. And here we have groups, expand, and you can see here, these are all of the things that you can do with that group right here. I do add permission. You notice it says it's not granted for access yet. So if I click inside here, then I can see the type of permissions that I'm doing. And then I can grant admin consent for this. This is going to change now, and it's granted access, so now my app can actually work. Right, so that's basically the environmental setup, and once you capture your app ID, your app secret, you set your permissions, you are good to go. And the other example, as you can see here, was all about connectors. All right, so let me just go ahead and move this back over yonder here, and we will start again from current slide. Okay, so the overview in terms of what we're going to do, and I'm just checking my time here real quick, 9 minutes, is we have consider a solution where you are you want to provide accolades for somebody. You're building something to build morale within the organization, and you want to create a form, if you will, or a mobile app, and you want people to fill out some information inside there, tap OK, and it's going to send something to the Microsoft Teams, to highlight, to emphasize, to celebrate, somebody within the organization. So an accolade, if you will. Here's something where you can have a website, you can have a mobile phone, you can have a bot, you can have all of the things that we saw previously in terms of why you should build using Azure Functions, all tied to a URL that can do something for you. Another example is where we have the visitor intake. So for a visitor intake, you want to make sure that you, especially in today's time, you have contact tracing, you have you have a responsible way to get people on your premises once people open up and people start to go to work again. So as people come into the building, you want to have a contactless environment where somebody can send an email to a team, because again, a group can have an email address, and then that puts something inside Microsoft Teams. It alerts the person who's going to be coming down to sign the person in. It also has the guard station ready to take that intake, send some protocol information to the person for people to fill out. In this case, you can send back. Again, remember, Teams has files from SharePoint. You may have templates there that once the person sends an email, you can do some document generation, send the paperwork for the person to fill out. Have I been, sick? Is my fever okay? Blah, 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 blah. All bunch of different stuff that you need to do to get, to get somebody inside an organization, make sure that they're squared away. And then also notify the person to come down and do some badging. So a couple different examples of how you could be doing this, and these are the solution overview. So what I'm going to show you here, I should have moved here before talking about that, is actually that solution in place. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to bring this guy over here, and because I want it to work, let's do this. Let's bring this in a little bit, and let's refresh this. Let's clear it. Oh, it's still refreshing. Let's clear this. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to go to here. Here, and grab, where do I have it? Hold on. Here it is, actually. Actually, what I should do is show you this solution first. Let's bring this down here. In this solution, what we actually have is, this is the one that's using the webhook, all right? So in the webhook, we have an Azure function, and this Azure function is actually going to be triggered by a queue. We're going to see what that queue looks like in a few minutes. And we're going to dump a JSON payload inside that queue. It is going to deserialize that payload. It's actually a lot bigger than what you see, what I'm going to be sending, but it's going to grab that URL from an environmental variable that I have. It's going to log some information. It is going to post to the webhook URL, and it is going to provide just one bit of item, which is basically the accolade statement. This is coming from a model that has inside there, actually it's here, there's a cleaner one actually. This is basically what the full JSON payload looks like, but we're just going to be sending one item for our demo test here today. But ideally, this is a form that you can fill out that's going to have all of this information inside there, and then it's going to basically send that information into a bunch of different places, plus create a message card, as you can see here, that is going to provide a summary with a team accolade, provide a color, has a section, provide a title, your colleague said, and then it's going to dump this text right there. Okay, so let me go ahead and move this back out of the way. And I am going to now come here and grab that team accolade. Control C, and I'm going to come down to here, and I'm going to, you can see the queue in Storage Explorer. I'm going to add a message, Control V, and say live demo. This I could be doing from anywhere. This is just basically me short-circuiting the system by going directly to the queue. This is the live demo. If I refresh this queue, it should go away. Let me just do this real quickly. Hopefully it doesn't make everything disappear. And inside here, hold on, let's go back to queue here. It's still there. Refresh. Still not triggered. All right. Okay. So I'll tell you what we're gonna do. So when you work with Azure Functions, there's such a thing as different plans. This plan is on the consumptive free plan, which means that it is not always active. So I'm gonna make sure it's connected. All right, there it is connected. I'm gonna make sure I get some little timeouts going. Let me come back over to here. There it is. You can see that's gone right there. Basically, once I refreshed it, the queue picked up, and in a few minutes, you'll see actually some login right there. But what we should see, if I bring this over here now, is down here. Yep, at the very bottom, we should have. This is the live demo. So basically, the information I pushed in, it says your colleague said, and then basically the text right here. So what we see here is the webhook version of this working. And again, working with Azure Functions, you have to ensure either you're going to have an always on plan, or if you're consumptive plan, you got to make sure you click refresh. By the time I've been talking here, it's already timed out. But again, that's just a benefit of me getting it for free. So it's going to work as it should work. The other example, as we saw before, was by using Microsoft Teams. And you saw that app registration process. So for that one, what I will do is bring over, where is that guy? Hold on. Here's my GitHub. There it is, exactly. So for the other one, what you can see inside, as I mentioned before, you can get the quick start. The quick start does come with something that's called Graph Helper, and what Graph Helper does basically is the ability to get you using your app ID, app secret, redirect URI, and scopes that you set, which is basically your permissions, provide you a context in which to work. It's going to ensure that you have a token. So basically what I did is I built on top of the graph helper and created something called a group helper. And I'm leveraging the graph helper inside here in order to get the group name by providing the name, which is the accolade, the team's team name, getting the ID, and later on basically pushing information into Microsoft Teams. So if you can code in Microsoft, if you can code using the graph, it's the same concept, except here, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, here's the name of the team I want to work with. Get me the team ID because you need to have the ID in order to work within that team, and then I can start to push things into it. So basically, again, trying to keep it in the confines of 30 minutes, there's tons of example out there that shows you how to do this. So I don't want to go too far into this because you can certainly find that. But the easier approach in terms of working with, the webhook, I think is quite valuable. And I think that is a very easy approach. As you can see clearly that within just several lines of code, we go back over to here, you can actually have a solution. And if you take out the login, this is basically maybe what, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of code. You can actually have a solution to work with Microsoft Teams, and you can determine to what extent you want to ingest the information that's coming from your queue or from anywhere else, and then deserialize it and then put it inside an adaptive cart. So with that being said, that is what I wanted to show you here today. I wanted to ensure that you understand that there's several different paths available to you. There's one out there on GitHub right now, and the call to action actually is to show you, actually not that one, to show you this site here that is basically doing the exact same thing that I did for the webhook example. It's showing you how to build it out step by step. As you can see, it's extremely simple, and it tells you how long it takes for the read. Yeah, 2 minutes to read, and you can basically create that solution that I have, that the team accolade. If you want something a little bit more robust, as I said, there's tons of examples out there in showing you how to work with the Microsoft Graph. But the final thing I'd like to do is just to show you this right here. I'd like to make sure that you guys, provide some feedback to the event coordinators and provide, individual speaker feedback as well. I hope you found this session useful. Thank you for your time and have a great day.